All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Q4 webinar, our latest Explained webinar this year. At Exclusive, we like to share knowledge. That is why we started this more than 3 years ago with the Explained and Expert concepts. Explains our knowledge sharing series by Exclusive Networks, Belgium, and we're really focused on cybersecurity, networking, and emerging technology topics. And since NIS2 has a huge impact on our technology sector, we also did several sessions already about this topic. So if you want to learn more about NIS2, you can check them out on our YouTube channel. But today we're going to talk about the impact of NIS2 1 year later. So we'll talk about the adoption in different countries in Europe, the impact on different sectors, also on technology and on companies, and our wise predictions about the future. So who are we? My name is Sam Van Hoff. I'm an Exclusive company and I manage the pre-sales team. I've been in IT security for now over 10 years, so I'm officially old, and I like to focus on emerging technology and evangelizing the channel.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Davey. I work in Stan's team. I've been an Exclusive for already 5 years. In IT security for a longer time. Most of my work is on technical aspects and that's the defense security just in general.
Okay, so we've done introductions. Now we can start. So first of all, who is struggling? A lot of different European countries are struggling with NIS2 and the adoption of it. Belgium is doing actually quite well, and some other countries also, which we'll see later, but it's still a difficult topic. More specific also about some specific sectors we're gonna target, cover today, and the more you read about it, the more difficult and rabbit hole like it gets with this topic. It's a lot of legal stuff, so we try to do it in a way that everybody can understand it, and also the technology impact of all these legislations. So a quick timeline. To start off, NIS2 is a directive, not a legislation, meaning a directive sets an objective and minimum standards. So each member state must transpose those into national law. And that's why when it came into place in the EU, it didn't come into place in every country immediately. At the start, there were only a handful of countries who implemented the directive. This improved over time, but still went on very slow. And even to EU standards is too slow, so that says something about it. That's why the EU actually sent out a communication to 19 countries, and it was called a reasoned opinion. It's kind of like a letter of a formal notice, and that can actually represent serious legal pressure. So the member states must respond and amend this legislation, or they have the risk of being sent to court. So today, 1 year later, 16 out of 27 countries are compliant, meaning they have implemented this correctly. Now, if you look online, some sources will say only 14 countries, but we've added the Czech Republic and Portugal because, in Czech Republic, it will be enforced from November 1st, and in Portugal, it already passed the parliament. It just needs to be published, and that's the difference. So this image comes from Field Fisher. They're a respectful law firm and specialized, among other things, in regulatory and cybersecurity. You will notice that Norway and Iceland isn't covered yet by NIS2 because they're actually a non-EU country. They're part of the EEA. And they will have their own specific legislation that will be based on NIS2. They did the same for NIS1, so at a moment in time, they also will introduce that. But let's take a closer look to those to the impact in those countries. And there's actually a very good report from ENISA, and that's the information that we also use for this topic. And the ENISA is actually the EU's main body responsible for improving cybersecurity across Europe. So this specific report, the NIS360, is a new initiative from ENISA, and is designed to assess how mature and how critical each NIS2 sector is. It offers a bigger picture and also a deeper analysis. So it's a good read. I advise you to take a look at it. So the whole purpose of NIS360 is to help national authorities and cybersecurity agencies that are responsible for putting NIS2 into practice. So it's really actually Europe saying, here guys, we offer you the tools, please implement this. David also talked about the technical guide they wrote. And it's really to help understand which sector is struggling, how they should take their priorities, and identify where improvements are needed. Beyond that, it also supports policymakers. So both national, but also very helpful for countries themselves to increase their cyber resilience. Let's take a look at specific pages from that report about the challenged sectors. They talk about these 6 specific. We're going to talk about 3 that we know from our day-to-day work, actually, which is IT service management. So companies who offer their services, they're also being targeted by NIS2, especially if they have data center services and stuff like that. And they are really burdened because, especially if that is a company that has multiple entities, it's very difficult for them to do all the investments and all the policies in place to make sure they're compliant. Of course, public administration, depending on the country, they don't do penalties for themselves. So meaning that the government, they're going to say, if we're not compliant, we're not going to be fined because, we would have to fine ourselves. So that takes off the pressure of actually being compliant. The same old reason they don't invest is because they have no budget. So certain entities within governments, they just don't have the budget for this. And overall, a lack of digitalization and having all tools in place. So they have other priorities, unfortunately, before they can do this. But also healthcare. Healthcare usually it's very complex for them. They have a huge supply chain, so it's almost impossible for them to check their entire supply chain and where they are at risk. But also legacy systems. I even heard this story from a CISO from a hospital, and he told me himself, so it's not hearsay, that they have an MRI machine, but they don't have a contract on it because it's so expensive. So meaning no contract, no support, no way to update those systems. That just gives you a view about how bad the situation is for those organizations.
And it's not only about the different sectors that are challenging. It in essence, actually, when you try to be compliant with NIS2, it also reflects immediately on the technology, and you can see the impact on the technology is just there. There's not really a proof, let's say, or not really indicators on how NIS2 affects adoption of different tools, but it is a necessity that there's a faster adoption of IAM tools. For example, have a proper IAM in place. MFA, of course, as you all know, is a minimum and a must-have. But also think like XDR, looking at scanning supply chain tools or third-party tools that's in use, and even GRCs, platforms, trust platforms that do a lot of the heavy lifting for you gets a faster adoption. We can see this improvement in our let's say our portfolio, our way of working. We can see this. NIS2 is not really giving an indication if their regulation is really enhancing or changing the adoption of these tools. But also the services, of course. Having a managed SOC on 24/7. There are companies that do NIS2 evaluations. If that's we put it in brackets because it's a question if that is indeed what you need. Is that even possible to do like an evaluation of something that probably changes on a daily basis because your environment changes as well. So you need to remain compliant and we're believers in more like the doing evaluations with tools. Compliance programs. It's important to have all these and these really impact the technologies in there. Now. A new report was actually released in June 26 by NISA, where they sort of map or try to make a bit of a bridge between the whole legal text and the whole technical, not technical, but very legal guidance of what needs to be done, and bring it more to an understandable technical level. So they call it the Technical Implementation Guide. It's really just released before summer, and probably they released it because they saw that adoption is going slow and maybe realizing that some organizations are just struggling, like, okay, what needs to be done, basically. So there are 13 core domains in this document. We're not going to list all 13 of them, but basically a few importance, for example, is the policy on security and network systems. So probably familiar for most of you, but also incident handling, supply chain security, which is a very important topic. And as I said, it's a translation between the legal text and just some good best practices on how to implement this. It's not going in depth on solution or technology, etc., but just like how technical operations can be or should be addressed in order to handle these core domains. And per domain, they give you like some guidance on what to do. They link it to the original text, NIS2 regulation. They show you how to do evidence collection and give you a few examples, which basically helps you get a better understanding on how to do it. And it's also a reference to compare it to your current implementation, your current situation there. They also provide a sort of a mapping, but this is an example, but a mapping between their regulations and other frameworks like ISO 27001, NIST 2.0, and even the cybersecurity fundamentals from the CCB in Belgium. And this is an example, for example, incident handling policy, and then they map it to these different standards. It's an Excel sheet that is attached to that technical reference guide. It's a good start, probably. It's still a lot of reading, still a lot of text, but it's yeah. Apparently, I think they saw the need for it, so that's definitely a good part. And one very important, but probably the most impactful article in this too is everything related to third-party supply chain. Every company these days needs to be every company who doesn't need to be compliant will still be like somehow probably involved with a company who needs to be compliant. And it's all about assessing the risk with who you're doing business with and who you're doing who you trust, and then building that trust. Maybe you cannot even do business with someone who's not longer NIS2 compliant, etc. It's important that you identify the role of your supplier or your service provider, and then based on that role, you can start assessing the risk and see what they need to be compliant with. It just leads to a lot of overhead, of course. I think if you just look at your own company and start thinking about who are we working with and are they compliant, yes or no, and can they prove they're compliant, it can become very a lot of work short term. A very interesting part that we saw in the technical implementation guide is a part about free and open source software, which I think probably everybody is using somehow, somewhere, if you think about it, if you go deep diving into it. But yeah, apparently everything that is open source, community-based, and maintained or whatever by partners or services or directly, it's not considered as a direct supplier or service provider, so it doesn't fall under the third-party supply chain. So that's a very interesting topic. Now, if you look at the trust in third-party supply chain, it brings you directly to what we call security questionnaires. And the question is, do you get a lot of questionnaires?
Well, depending on your role in the organization, some people will already recognize this. This is a new way of establishing that trust, is sending a lot of questionnaires to each other. So it's not a question if you got it, the question is how often do you get those questionnaires? And I can tell you for larger organizations, this is almost a daily task in getting those questionnaires out, but also in and replying on them. The whole idea is after such a questionnaire, you have a good idea about the risk you have with that specific supplier. But of course, it's it's just paper trail, right? People are filling this in, but if you can actually show that you're being compliant and there is a breach, you will have an issue, because that's an end of trust and maybe an end of partnership. So it's a good wake-up call for some organizations, because they're filling in and they have to answer like no about a lot of different controls, and that gives you an idea that maybe you're not that mature yet in your cybersecurity posture. A good example of how impactful supply chain could be is the Brussels airport attack. It was also in Heathrow, but it was less severe there. But it was a supplier. So getting feedback from suppliers to understand the risk is one thing, but it's still your problem when hell breaks loose. You'll need to be able to recover quickly, because if you depend on a third party for crucial parts, for example, check-in in this case, it's crucial for your business operation. So SLAs won't help you at that point, because reputation damage is already done and you have to fix it yourself. At this point, there's no sign yet of any fine that somebody had of not being compliant, even though it's already in law for Belgium, for example, and other countries. The focus now is still on awareness. They're putting a lot of effort in there. Of course, there are a lot of countries who are not compliant yet, so they're not going to give fines either. But you can see there's a lot of pressure from the EU about that adoption and focusing on awareness. If we look back at the latest big beautiful bill that the EU pushed, it was about GDPR, right? I think we all had were a little bit scared about what the impact would be of GDPR, and how long it took for the first fines. So if you look at the data actually was enforced, it was in 2018. And the first fine, significant fines, at least was late 2018 and mid 2019. So that gives you an idea for your country when it's out of the legislation, how much time you'll have before those first fines will come in. This is an example of the largest fines that were issued by GDPR, and I can understand you saying right now, yeah, okay, but what is the chance that it's for my company? Because look at all these big tech giants here, and okay, that's true. But like in GDPR and NIS2, it will be if you're an essential entity, it's like 2% of your global annual turnover. If you're a important entity, it's going to be 1.4% of your global turnover. And it also exists for just normal companies to be fined. You can go to the website, it's called enforcementtracker.com, and they try to track every fine that's been put out there regarding GDPR in different countries in Europe. And then you can see that it's not only the big tech companies that get fined, also smaller companies are getting fined, and you can see exactly the reason why. And for example, here, insufficient technical and organizational measures to ensure information security. So meaning they didn't do what was necessary for the security posture. So we can expect something like this for NIS2, but at first it's all about the awareness. So we're still in that phase. So for Belgium, for example, and other countries who are already compliant, we will think by mid and end next years that the larger institutions will be fined if they're not compliant, and especially if there's a breach. And for other countries, it will be begin 2027. Now it's the year 25, so we need to talk about AI in every different topic. That's why I'm quickly gonna just say something about the AI Act. The AI Act is like GDPR regulation, meaning there is no local transposition needed. So it's already effective into place. The whole goal of this is for a safe and trustworthy and transparent use of AI. So not like in the States or in China where everybody's data is just being abused. And the goal is to mitigate those specific AI risks. Stuff about bias manipulation, safety failures, data misuse, all those type of things regarding AI models. Now, this is a topic of its own, but just know that all of companies will have until August 2026 to be compliant. And the EU AI Act and NIS2 directive, they overlap significantly because both aim to strengthen the digital resilience, but also accountability. So they want to force companies into treat cybersecurity and AI governance as interconnected. All right. And FYI, there's already a legal framework. You can use ISO 42001. So this was it. It's a short session, so you get a lot of time back. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you have any questions, just reach out to us and we will try to answer any other questions if you have some now.